In 1920, a wealthy family purchased an ornate mirror from Paris, but by nightfall, their home was changed forever. I remember that winter as if it were painted into the cracks of my mind, pale and glimmering and cruelly quiet. The year was 1920, and I had just arrived at the Wexler estate, a sprawling mansion nestled at the edge of Whitby, a place where the fog moved like breath over the earth. I had been hired as a private caretaker and record keeper for the family, a position both humble and strangely personal. They were a distinguished family, Lord and Lady Wexler, their young daughter Eliza, and a house too vast for its occupants. It was there I first saw it, the mirror. It had arrived the same morning I did, encased in velvet and silence. Two men from Paris carried it through the grand hall with visible unease, as if it had weight beyond glass and wood. Its frame was carved from dark mahogany, twisting into shapes that almost resembled faces, delicate, mournful, and almost alive. Lady Wexler was enchanted by it from the first glance. "Oh, it's divine," she whispered, her gloved fingers tracing its edge. They say it once hung in a Parisian theater, where a woman took her final bow and vanished. Lord Wexler scoffed at such talk, yet I saw something uneasy in his eyes. Perhaps it was the same feeling that wrapped itself around my chest, that quiet, breathless chill you cannot name but only feel. They placed it in the east drawing room, the one that caught the least sunlight, and the mirror seemed to belong there, as though it had been waiting. The Wexlers were a strange family. They spoke often of art, of spirits, and of the old world charm. At dinner, they would toast to forgotten eras, and Eliza, the child, would hum to herself in a way that set my teeth on edge. I began keeping a journal, as was my habit. On the first night, I wrote simply, "The house feels awake." The second night, I awoke to the sound of footsteps above my room. Slow, deliberate, yet I knew the upper floor had been sealed for renovation. When I asked Lord Wexler about it the next morning, he only smiled faintly. "You mustn't pay attention to the sounds," he said. "This house remembers." On the third night, Lady Wexler asked me to fetch her sewing kit from the east drawing room. It was nearly midnight, and the house was silent except for the crackle of the fireplace. When I entered, the mirror stood against the far wall, its surface faintly rippling in the candlelight, though there was no draught. I remember the reflection. It showed the room perfectly, except for one thing. My reflection did not move. It stood there, still as a photograph, watching me. I blinked, thinking it was fatigue, and stepped closer. The surface wavered like water. My reflection's eyes followed mine. Slow, wrong. Its lips parted, just enough to whisper something I couldn't hear. The candle flickered out. I swear to you, I heard breathing, not behind me, but inside the glass. When I told Lady Wexler the next morning, she smiled as though she'd expected it. "It said," she began, "that the mirror shows not what is, but what was meant to be. It reveals the soul as it truly stands." Her words unsettled me. I asked who had owned it before. "A theater in Paris," she said softly. "A woman performed before it every night, and one evening she never came off stage. They say her reflection stayed behind." By the end of the week, I noticed the servants had begun avoiding the east drawing room. Dishes left untouched, curtains drawn. Even the air seemed heavier. And Eliza, sweet, pale Eliza, began speaking to someone only she could see. At breakfast, she said, "The lady in the mirror told me your name before I even knew it." I dropped my spoon. "What lady, Eliza?" She smiled, her eyes too old for her face. "She looks like you, only sadder." That night, I dreamed of the mirror. I dreamt I stood before it again, but this time my reflection smiled back. Not a kind smile, one stretched and sharp. I felt something pulling me closer, as though invisible fingers pressed against the other side of the glass, begging to trade places. When I woke, I found frost blooming along the inside of my window in the shape of a hand. The next morning, Lord Wexler confided something to me. "We bought the mirror from an auction," he said. "The seller warned us never to hang it near natural light, and never to let a child see her reflection in it." "But why?" I asked. He hesitated, staring out the fogged window. "Because in Paris, they say it doesn't reflect, it remembers." And once it remembers you, it doesn't forget. That night, the house seemed colder, the air heavy. The east drawing room door creaked open on its own, and from the darkness inside, I could swear I saw someone move. A pale shape, standing before the mirror, watching, waiting. When I whispered her name, Eliza, the shape smiled. But Eliza was asleep in her room. Sleep abandoned me after that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the mirror and the stillness of my reflection. There's something unspeakably wrong about seeing yourself and knowing, somehow, that it isn't you. The east drawing room had been locked since the incident, but locks mean little when the thing you fear isn't outside the door. By the third night, I began hearing it. A whisper, faint like silk dragged across wood. Sometimes it came from the hall, other times from my dreams. Always the same phrase, repeated like a secret being rehearsed. Come closer. I only want to see you. The first time I heard it clearly, I was writing in my journal. The voice came from behind me, soft as breath against my neck. When I turned, the air seemed to ripple. The candlelight bent, and for the briefest moment, the mirror's reflection flickered on the wall, though the drawing room door was still shut. The next morning, Lady Wexler looked pale. Her hair was undone, her eyes bloodshot. "You hear her too, don't you?" she asked without preamble. I hesitated. "You mean the voice?" She nodded. "She comes when the house sleeps. She asks questions that no one should answer." "What does she want?" Lady Wexler's lips trembled. "To remember. To return." By that evening, even the servants had gone. One claimed to have seen her reflection smiling in the hallway mirror when she passed by. Another swore that her own face blinked before she did. By dawn, they'd all left without collecting their pay. Only the Wexlers and I remained. On the seventh night, I found Eliza standing outside the east drawing room. She was barefoot, her nightdress trailing along the cold floor. "Eliza," I whispered, "why are you here?" She didn't turn. "She called me," she said. "She said she wanted to show me something beautiful." I took a step closer, but she raised her hand, pointing toward the keyhole. "She's crying," she whispered. I knelt, trembling, and put my ear to the door. There was indeed a sound, faint, distant, like someone sobbing behind glass. I unlocked the door before I could think better of it. The air inside the room was colder than the rest of the house. My breath came out in small white clouds. The mirror stood where it always had, tall, ancient, and impossibly still. But it was not empty. There was a woman in the reflection. Her dress was from another age, layers of silk and lace, soaked through with something dark. Her face pale as bone, her eyes hollow yet filled with recognition. She was looking directly at me. "Eliza," I said, stepping back, "go to your room." But the child only smiled. "She says you already belong to her." Before I could react, the mirror's surface rippled, a shudder like a drop of rain hitting still water, and for one impossible instant, the woman's hand pressed against the glass. I swear I saw the surface bulge outward, as if the mirror were breathing. I slammed the door shut. When I turned, Eliza was gone. We searched the entire house that night. Every corridor, every room, every locked door. Lord Wexler was shouting her name until his voice broke. Lady Wexler wept until she collapsed. At dawn, I returned to the east drawing room. The mirror was perfectly still, but now there were two figures inside it, the woman and the child. Eliza's eyes met mine through the glass. She mouthed something, her voice lost to the silence. "Help me." Lady Wexler refused to enter the room again. She fell ill soon after, refusing food, mumbling about sins and bargains. Lord Wexler grew distant, his mind unraveling faster than the days passed. He spent hours sitting in front of the locked door, muttering prayers. I tried to reason with him. We must destroy it, break the mirror. He looked at me then, and I'll never forget his expression, a mix of horror and obsession. "She's still there," he whispered. "My little girl. If I break it, she dies." For 3 nights, I heard Eliza's voice calling from inside, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying, always begging. The house no longer felt like a home. The clocks had stopped. The air was thick, unmoving. Shadows lingered too long, and reflections no longer matched reality. One evening, I passed the grand hallway and saw my reflection in the window. It smiled. I didn't. I knew what I had to do. When the moon rose, I unlocked the east drawing room for the last time. The mirror loomed there, and for the first time, I felt something emanating from it. A pulse. A heartbeat. I stood before it and whispered, "What are you?" And it answered. The surface darkened, and my reflection began to speak. The lips moved out of sync with mine. "I am memory," it said. "I'm what you bury. I am what you forget." Its voice wasn't just sound. It was inside me, echoing behind my ribs. "You are hollow," it whispered. "Let me fill you." My reflection reached toward me from the other side. I felt the glass beneath my fingertips, warm now, alive. It pulled at me, gently at first, then violently, until I stumbled forward. And for the briefest moment, I saw another world inside. A vast, endless hall of mirrors, each one containing a different face, a different life, all staring back at me. Some screaming, some smiling, all trapped. Then the candle went out. When I awoke, the mirror was cracked. The woman was gone. Eliza was gone. And my reflection didn't move. Morning came, though the light felt wrong. The air was thick and cold, like something unseen had soaked into the walls overnight. I couldn't shake the feeling that the house itself was watching me breathe. When I went to the east drawing room, the mirror stood where it always had. Cracked, yes, a long, jagged fracture running through its center, but still impossibly whole. The glass should have splintered, fallen apart. Instead, it seemed to heal. The crack shimmered faintly, like skin mending beneath a wound. And my reflection was late. It didn't appear when I did. For a few seconds, the glass showed only the empty room behind me. And then, slowly, my reflection slid into place, as though it had been walking from a great distance. That's when I knew something inside it still lived. The Wexlers were gone. Lord Wexler had vanished the night before. Lady Wexler was found sitting at the dining table, her eyes open, unseeing. The doctor said it was shock. I called it something else, the mirror's mercy. I was alone now, or perhaps not alone enough. I tried to leave the house that morning. The front doors refused to open. The latches turned but held fast, like someone was gripping them from the other side. Every window I approached darkened, showing only my reflection pressed against the glass. And every reflection smiled. "You can't leave," one whispered. "We're not finished," said another. I fled back to my room, locking the door behind me. I wrote for hours, desperate to anchor myself to reality. But even as I wrote, the ink began to blur. My handwriting changed, growing elegant and old-fashioned, forming words I didn't recognize. The glass remembers. The glass forgives. The glass devours. That night, I dreamed again. I stood inside the mirror, looking out at the world I had known. The room was there, empty, dim. My body stood on the other side, still, eyes dull, as if waiting for me to return. The air shimmered like heat around me, and in that shimmer, I saw countless others. Faces I didn't know, pressed against invisible walls, whispering prayers or curses. One of them, the woman from before, turned to me. Her face was pale, beautiful, and ruined. "You broke the glass," she said softly. I told her. "It took the child." She smiled. "The mirror doesn't take. It trades." I woke to find the mirror whole again. No cracks. No dust. Perfect. And in it, my reflection was smiling, though my own face was not. That was the first time I screamed. The reflection raised a hand, slowly, deliberately, and though mine remained at my side, I felt pressure inside my bones, a pull, as if invisible strings had been attached to me. Then it began to mimic my breath, perfectly synchronized, until I couldn't tell which one of us was leading. For days, I stayed away from the east drawing room. I sealed the door, covered every other mirror in the house with cloth, and smashed the ones I couldn't move. Yet even the smallest fragments, a glint of glass in a picture frame, showed it. Always watching, always waiting. Sometimes it would appear behind me in places no mirror existed, in polished metal, in water, even in my own eyes when I blinked too long. The voice began to follow me again. At first it whispered, then it spoke. "You opened the door. You looked too long. Now you must remember me." I tried to drown it with silence, but it grew louder, echoing in every heartbeat. I began to doubt the rhythm of my own pulse. Was it mine or the mirror's? One evening, as dusk fell over the estate, I returned to the drawing room. I don't know why. Maybe curiosity. Maybe guilt. The air smelled of dust and roses, old perfume. The mirror gleamed faintly in the dark. I stood before it and whispered, "Where are they? The Wexlers? The girl?" The reflection tilted its head. Its mouth moved, and I heard my own voice answer, but from inside the glass. "They're still here." The reflection stepped backward, revealing what lay behind it. A great hall of flickering mirrors stretching into infinity. And in each one, figures moved. Shadows of the Wexlers, the servants, the woman from Paris, all walking endlessly, as though trapped between moments. "There's always a price," my reflection said. "You freed her. Now you'll take her place." The surface of the mirror began to ripple again. This time I didn't resist. I don't remember crossing the threshold. Only the feeling of falling through water, the sudden stillness, and the unbearable weight of silence. Then, I was standing in the reflection. The room was reversed. The air was heavy. The candlelight flickered backward, bending toward the flame instead of away. On the other side of the glass, my body stood still, eyes blank, expression calm. It looked alive. It was alive. And then, my reflection, my replacement, turned and walked away. I screamed. I pounded against the glass until my hands bled, but the sound made no echo. The only reply was from the other mirrors in this world, all the others trapped inside, their faces turning toward me in unison, their voices whispering as one. "Welcome home." Days, or perhaps years, passed here. There is no time where the mirror keeps you. The light never changes. The air never moves. The silence becomes your name. I watch my old life through the glass sometimes. My body walks the halls, writes in my journal, even smiles at visitors. It's perfect, better than I ever was. But sometimes it looks at the mirror. And for a brief moment, I see it smile back at me. I want you to imagine a mirror that remembers more than its reflections. A mirror that holds every name whispered in front of it, every sorrow, every broken vow. After the events of 1920, the Wexler estate fell into ruin. The grounds grew over, windows broke, ivy crept into rooms. The mirror remained, unclaimed, uncleaned, held in its east drawing room, gathering dust and dark memory. I was locked inside that glass. They said I disappeared. Officially, Lord Wexler's body was never found. Lady Wexler declared insane, presumed to have fled or perished. No one believed the stories of reflections walking out, of voices in the walls. Decades passed. Wars, revolutions, the turning of the century. The mansion changed hands several times. Rumors spread of its curse. Local lore mentioned the mirror, whispering about how strange lights flickered in broken windows, how neighbors smelled perfume in empty halls. Some compared it to the legends of Myrtle's plantation. They said faces in glass, shifting shadows, or Bela Lugosi's mirror, used in scrying, of people who claimed they saw things best unseen. These were spoken of in hushed tones, after dark, with a nervous laugh. Maybe the Wexler mirror is like that, they said. In 1975, or thereabouts, a collector named Miriam Hale bought the mansion. She was passionate about antiques, especially glassware and furniture. She had heard the local stories but dismissed them as superstition. She loved anything with history. She moved in, restored the grounds, repaired the drawing room. One day she discovered the ornate mirror from Paris, still intact, though the frame worn. She placed it in her private gallery under soft lighting. At first all was well. Guests admired the craftsmanship, the dark mahogany frame, twisted carvings that seemed to form faces in the wood, the glass still smooth and chilling. Nightmares, vivid ones of someone trapped behind a mirror, calling, crying. Disturbing reflections. At dusk, she saw figures behind her in the glass, even when none were there. Physical symptoms, headaches, nausea, odd for someone otherwise in good health. She contacted scholars, paranormal investigators. Someone mentioned ghostly mirrors and other legends. They spoke of Myrtle's plantation mirrors with handprints that appear spontaneously. Bela Lugosi's mirror, as written in Skeptical Inquirer, that guest felt ill, saw strange visions, maybe because of scrying. Miriam wondered if the mirror had some occult history before Paris. As I watched from inside, I sensed Miriam's mind opening, the mirror responding. It began to whisper to her, slowly, at first as indistinct murmurs, then with clarity. "I am memory. I remember you." She dismissed it, but the mirror showed her painting portraits of people she never met, rooms she never entered. Images from the 1920s, a child standing before the same carved frame, Lady Wexler's pale face, Lord Wexler's hands gripping wood. She tried to photograph these. The photos always came out distorted, blurred, double exposure, faces overlapping. One image she kept saw a handprint appear on the glass, not hers. One stormy night, Miriam's gallery flooded with moonlight. The windows, broken by vines, let pale beams across the mirror. She had always kept it under a shade at night, just like warnings from earlier legends. This echoes stories where owners are told, never let a mirror face natural moonlight/sunlight at certain times. Echoes from folklore. Curiosity overcame fear. Miriam removed the shade. The glass pulsed. The frame's carvings looked alive, like tortured faces writhing. The reflection warped. Miriam saw not herself, but me, my face, hollow and weeping. "Come closer," came a voice, soft as silk, dangerous as night. She leaned forward, mesmerized. Her own reflection shifted, revealing behind it the old drawing room in its original form. Candles, the fireplace lit. Lady Wexler sewing. Eliza watching a puppet show, Lord Wexler reading. And then the mirror cracked, not breaking open, but splitting as though reality had fractured. After Miriam's disappearance, no one quite knows what happened. Some say she vanished that night. The mirror was sold again, to an antique dealer in present day. It is now housed in a private collection. People pay to see it, feel its presence. Rumors. A viewer stared into it and saw faces of children dancing in a field, but heard sobbing instead of laughter. Another said their own reflection winked, though they never did. Some visitors report headaches after seeing it, or feel watched long after they leave. People compare it to the London Victorian mirror whose owners, Birch and Carolambis, experienced illness, nightmares, bad luck. Someone once posted about a mirror found in a dumpster that started whispering. These stories are shared in folklore blogs, paranormal forums. And so here I stand, the reflection, perfectly still. I feel Miriam's breath in the hall outside, her footsteps, though she is nowhere to be seen. She might be inside, on the other side, or lost entirely. The mirror's gallery is softly lit. I watch visitors move before the glass. Some smile, some tremble, some don't recognize what they see. I have learned something more in these decades. The mirror does not just reflect, does not just remember, it trades. It trades presence. It trades identity. And every so often, when someone unguards their eyes, when someone leans too close, it invites a trade again. Perhaps today, you lean too close. Perhaps today, you see me, but I see you. And if you watch long enough, if you listen to the whispers, you might find that you are in the glass, and I am free. They said the mirror came from a French estate, but in truth, it had passed through many hands before ours, and left none of them whole. I learned this too late through scraps of letters, sales ledgers, and a London clipping dated 1922 from the Illustrated London News. The article spoke of a Merle Street mirror, an ornate frame of dark walnut, imported from the continent, that had caused distress and spectral visitations to its owners. Its photograph, though faded and grainy, matched mine perfectly. Even the cracks along the bevel were identical. The journalist mentioned a reflection of a woman in mourning garments appearing behind the viewer's shoulder, a woman no one could identify. The house was later sealed. The mirror sold quietly at an auction on the Rue Saint-Denis in Paris. I realized with a shudder that was the very street my grandfather had purchased it from in 1920. So the curse did not start with us. We were merely another chapter. By then, My nights had become hollow corridors of sound. The mirror had ceased showing only my reflection. Now it showed scenes. At first, they were faint, like ghostly tableaus etched in fog. A ballroom lit by gaslight, faces from another century laughing, moving, living. I could hear the faint notes of a violin echoing behind the glass. But then I began to recognize them. The faces from the illustrated news photograph. The woman in mourning. The man with the monocle. They stood inside my mirror, frozen in the same poses as the article described, as though the image itself had leaked into reality. I called for my wife one night, but when she entered, the vision vanished. To her, the mirror was empty. "You're pale," she whispered. "You need rest." I almost told her the truth. Almost. Days blurred. I found myself staring at my reflection for hours, feeling the subtle delay in its movements, as though my image thought before it mirrored me. It began blinking seconds after I did, smiling slightly wider, longer, and one morning, when the sunlight cut across the glass, I realized my reflection was no longer me at all. Its eyes were too dark, its face thinner. I took a step forward, and it tilted its head not to watch me, but as though studying me. I felt something cold spread through my chest. That night, I smashed the mirror. Or at least I thought I did. The sound was deafening. Shards exploded outward, glittering like rain. But when I opened my eyes, the wall was bare, and yet the reflection remained. It stood in empty air, a perfect pane of light suspended before me, as though the mirror existed without matter. And then it stepped forward. I woke the next morning on the floor, wrists bleeding from glass cuts that didn't exist. My wife had gone to stay with her sister. The servants refused to enter the master bedroom. That was when I began to research mirror superstitions, desperate for answers. I found a passage in an old Victorian journal describing how mourners once covered mirrors after a death, lest the spirit, lost and wandering, become trapped in the glass. The Smithsonian Archives would later confirm this custom, and I realized the significance. Mirrors were not simple reflections. They were thresholds. I wrote to a folklorist named Dr. Schlosser in America, who studied something called soul trap mirrors. She replied weeks later with a chilling note. The mind does not project into a mirror. The mirror projects into the mind. Do not stare long. The longer you look, the less of you returns. I stopped writing after that, but I could not stop looking. The mirror's absence in the room was unbearable. Every polished surface, the clock, the window, the silver tray, began to warp faintly, showing glimpses of that other place. Once, I saw my reflection wave at me through the glass of a picture frame. And one night, when lightning cracked over the manor, the windows reflected a dozen faces watching from outside, pale, expressionless, all pressed against the glass. I knew then that the mirror had never been destroyed. It had multiplied. It existed wherever I looked. Weeks later, I sealed the house and left for London, carrying only my journal and the faded newspaper clipping. I intended to find the original auction records, to trace where the mirror had gone before us. But when I reached the archives, the clerk grew pale at the mention of the Rue Saint-Denis auction. "We don't keep those files," she said. "They were burned in 23. And if you're wise, you'll let them stay gone." She paused before adding quietly, "But I've seen that mirror. Not in Paris. Here. Here." I whispered. She nodded. "In a townhouse on Merle Street. They say it watches." I never found that address. Some nights, I wonder if it ever existed. But sometimes, when the air is still and the lamps flicker low, I catch the faint outline of a mirror in my study wall where no glass hangs. And when I dare to look closer, I see not myself, but the man who owned it before me. He mouths something I can't hear, and I pray I never do. When I left London, I thought I'd escaped. I burned the clipping, sealed my notes, and never spoke of the mirror again. But some things you do not escape, you only delay. For years, I lived quietly in the countryside. No mirrors in my home. No polished glass, no reflections. Even the windows, I kept covered with thick drapes, so sunlight could not catch the surface. People thought me eccentric or mad. Perhaps I was. But madness is preferable to the thing that waits behind the glass. I thought the silence would keep it away. But silence is only an invitation for memory. And memory, I have learned, is another kind of mirror. In 1954, long after the house had been sold, I received a parcel with no return address. Inside was a photograph, black and white, printed on glossy paper. It showed a London antique shop, the kind that sells dusty trinkets and forgotten heirlooms. In the corner of the photo stood it, that mirror, the ornate walnut frame, the curling vines, the same hairline crack along the edge. A small tag beneath it read, Origin, Paris, circa 1880. I felt my heart stop. I hadn't seen that shape in 3 decades. And yet, even through the photograph, the glass seemed alive, like it knew I was looking. There was no letter, no explanation, only that image. And on the back, in faint pencil, it remembers you. I burned the photo that night, but the image never left. Even now, as I write this, I can still recall every line of that reflection, though I should not be able to, because the glass in that photo did not show the shopkeeper. It showed me, not as I was in 1954, but as I had been in 1920, younger, pale, standing inside the mirror. Years passed again. I grew old, and the world changed. But sometimes, when the television flickered off or the surface of my tea caught the light just right, I saw it again, that faint, impossible shimmer, a shadow behind the reflection. Watching, waiting. I try not to think about it until the day my great-nephew, a filmmaker, visited. He found my journals, the ones you've been hearing me read from. He was fascinated by the story, said it was perfect for YouTube. He wanted to tell it online. The haunted mirror of 1920, he called it. He said the world loved true horror. I told him not to. I begged him not to. But he laughed. It's just a story, Uncle, he said. Besides, people love cursed objects. It'll go viral. That was 2 months ago. Last night, he called me, or rather, I think it was him. The line was filled with static. His voice trembled. Uncle, it's here. The mirror. It's here in my room. I didn't buy it, I swear. Someone sent it to me after the video went live. It just appeared. Then silence. The next morning, police found his apartment empty. Only his camera remained, still recording. And in the corner of the footage, you can see it. That same ornate mirror. And behind the glass, a faint figure watching him. A figure in 1920s clothing. I don't know how you found this story. Perhaps you saw the same video. Perhaps you're listening to this late at night, with the lights low and your reflection faint in your screen. If so, I need you to do something. Look away. Don't stare into the dark parts of the glass. Don't trace your own eyes too long, because it's through attention that it finds you. That's what I never understood back then. It doesn't need your belief, only your gaze. Every time you look, you open the door a little wider. Somewhere, even now, that mirror still exists. Passed between owners, resurfacing every few decades. Auctioned, gifted, sent in parcels to those who seek the story. I've seen it online now. They call it the Merle Street Mirror, the same name from that 1922 article. The Illustrated London News Archives, 1922. Collectors claim it's authentic paranormal history. And maybe they're right, because when they post photos of it, the reflection always shows one thing that shouldn't be there. A faint outline of a man writing at a desk, his face half lit by candlelight. If you're still watching this, do one thing for me before you go to sleep tonight. Cover your mirrors. All of them. Just for one night. And if you wake in the dark and hear a soft tap against the glass, don't look, because that's how it begins.